Alright. We should be streaming now. Let me see here. Yeah, there we go. Yep, we're live. Hello, hello. Sorry about being a little late, but yeah. Anywho. Alright. Let's get to it.
50 years after Ida Tarbell's scathing attack on John D. Rockefeller Sr. in McClure's magazine, Fortune magazine published a glowing profile of his grandchildren. Each brother was said to be worth upwards of $100 million. But more important than their wealth, Fortune argued, was the vast social empire which the brothers commanded. From their headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, their influence reached into every sphere.
Over the years, through the Rockefeller philanthropic enterprises, charities, support of science, their business enterprises, a web had developed which spread out and was interconnected with practically every center of power in our country and abroad as well. So this was the real strength and power of the family, going well beyond money alone.
Sometimes they would joke about it. They say, well, David gets Europe, Nelson is going to have Latin America, and, John D. III gets Asia, and then they make some joke about what Winthrop got, which would be something like Arkansas.
Under this fractional reserve scheme, we inevitably become debt slaves to a ruling class of financial elite, not because they are better or smarter than anyone else, but because they have rigged the system to benefit themselves at the expense of most people on the planet. Catherine Austin Fitts is an expert on this issue. She was an Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President George Bush Sr., and then an advisor to the Clinton administration.
Let's set up a game of Monopoly and you want to buy Park Place. What I can continually do is just print money, give myself more money, lower the value of your money by printing more. No matter how hardworking you are or how successful you are, I can always end up buying you for free.
So how come if you or I make up money, it's called counterfeiting, but if the banks do it, it's increasing the money supply? How did the banks get this power? This is Jekyll Island, where in 1910, representatives from the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Morgans, and other private bankers gathered, secretly, to draft the legislation that would create the Federal Reserve. Ed Griffin literally wrote the book on what happened at Jekyll Island.
Central banks are banking cartels which have gone into partnership with the respective governments in the countries where they operate. And they've been given monopolistic power over the creation of the nation's money supply. That's what the politicians handed to them as a gift, you might say, for the partnership. Now, in return, what did the bankers do for the politicians? They promised to create money out of nothing, now that they've got this legal power to do it, anytime the government needs it.
And since 2008, we've witnessed the greatest fake money printing run in recorded history. This financial sleight of hand disguises the costs, hides who's to blame, and leaves us as debt slaves working to pay off the bill. I found it revealing that in the same year the Federal Reserve was founded, 1913, the Internal Revenue Service was also established. An income tax was then instigated so you and I would have to pay the politicians' debt, plus interest, to the bankers.
The problem is we have a privately owned central bank system in the United States disguised as a government-owned system. Now, if you look in the telephone book here in the Washington, D.C. area, you look up for Federal Reserve in the blue government pages, it's not there. It's in the white pages right next to Federal Express. It's a privately owned central bank.
What is the proper relationship, what should be the proper relationship between a chairman of the Fed and a president of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. There is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
We have a private bank that prints money on behalf of the Treasury. The Federal Reserve prints money on a debt-based system which creates scarcity. But it puts a group of insiders in a position of having access to all the data about the economy when we don't. So you have a small group of bankers who understand the data on how the money works in the economy, and it gives them the ability to print money in a way that the insiders are protected and everybody else is trained.
Catherine went on to compare a healthy economy to a vibrant torus, balanced, freely flowing, and energized throughout, in contrast to what's happening in our current economy.
What you have is a system that's very dynamic, and it's trying to optimize. But intertwined in the core of it, you have a tapeworm. The way a tapeworm works in your body is it injects a chemical into your body that makes you crave what's good for the tapeworm and bad for you. You have a parasite that's very much manipulating and engorging itself at the expense of the whole.
We live in a tapeworm economy where the financial elite are the tapeworm and they're feeding on us. And they don't like it when people blow their cover. After Catherine began exposing government corruption at the highest levels, the FBI raided her company and seized its assets. She was dragged through the courts for 10 years before being found innocent. So we've got the Federal Reserve, a privately owned corporation with a monopoly on creating money, but with no accountability, backed up by a government with a monopoly on force. The country got sold on the Fed as an institution that would help stabilize the economy and remain independent of politics. But in fact, in close to a century of existence, the Federal Reserve has done just the opposite. Since they took charge, we've been robbed through inflation, and the purchasing power of the dollar has declined more than 96%. And the wealth gap makes it clear most of the money is going to a very few. Only 16 years after the Federal Reserve was in power, America experienced the Great Depression. My research revealed that before the big crash in 1929, the elite bankers pulled their money out of the stock market. After the crash, they used that money to buy up cheap stocks and smaller failing banks for pennies on the dollar. Among the bankers who consolidated their wealth this way were the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and Morgans. A similar scenario played out in the 2008 financial collapse, with the same bankers benefiting. In the years leading up to the collapse, the biggest banks, including Bank of America, Citigroup, and Chase, controlled by the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and Morgans, were bundling and trading bad loans that they knew would eventually fail. It's like putting rotten oranges in a box and selling them as grade AAA. The bundlers of the debt knew it was only a matter of time before someone would open that box and see that the content was worthless, since they were the ones who packed the boxes in the first place. When the rotten oranges, what we hear about as unsound loans, derivatives, and credit default swaps, were finally discovered, everyone was impacted. People lost their homes, their jobs, their businesses, and their retirements. Meanwhile, the biggest banks who created the problem in the first place were the ones who got bailed out. Why's that? Why would the Federal Reserve give trillions to the banks, even though the majority of Americans were against bailing them out? And why not help those most in need rather than the perpetrators of the financial collapse? My research led me to believe that the same people who created the Federal Reserve, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and the Morgans, still control it, and they use this scheme to bail themselves out at our expense.
Many of the banks created are still the most powerful lobby on Capitol Hill, and they, frankly, own the place.
I'm convinced that the near collapse of the economy in 2008 resulted from an orchestrated pump and dump scheme designed and executed by the big bankers to consolidate wealth and power. David Icke explains how he sees the Federal Reserve rigging the so-called business cycles.
Stage one, it's like throwing a fishing line out. Stage one, you put lots of money, units of exchange, into circulation. You do this by pushing interest rates down, by making lots of loans. This is the part of the cycle we call a boom. Because there's lots of units of exchange in circulation, there's lots of money changing hands. That generates lots of economic activity. That generates jobs. And as more and more money is spent, there's more demand. So companies take out more loans of fresh air money to increase their production. People get confident in their everyday lives. Hey, you know, I work for this company. They've got lots of orders. It's really going great. My job's safe. I tell you what, we can have a bigger house. Then they start to change it. What they do is they pull the fishing line in. They push interest rates up. Now, fewer people, are taking out loans, and they make the criteria for having a loan from the bank stronger anyway. And also, now, as interest rates have gone up, a larger part of people's income is going to pay back the extra interest and not being circulated in buying things. Suddenly, there's nothing like as much money in circulation, and therefore, fewer things are being bought. Companies start to go down in terms of their profits. They start to shed jobs, and they start to go out of business. People lose their jobs. They can't pay the mortgage anymore of the big house they took out in the good times. Now what the banks are doing is starting to reel the fishing line in, because as they go bankrupt, companies and individuals, the banks get the real wealth, the property, the land, the resources that they had signed to them for lending merely figures on a screen. Now this economic cycle of fishing line out, fishing line back, lots of units in circulation, pull them in, has been going on for centuries. And what it's done, it's stolen and accumulated the real wealth of the world in the hands of the few.
At the international level, central bankers use the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to make more money while exploiting the resources of countries they lend to, bankrupting them in the process. The central bank of central banks is the Rothschild-created Bank for International Settlements. The elite are positioning themselves to control access to virtually everything we need to survive.
No matter where you go in the world, the money is controlled by the banking system. They decide if people eat or if they don't eat. Who's a billionaire and who lives on less than $1 a day? He who controls the money controls the world, and a very few control the money.
At this point, my view of the world had been turned upside down. I was struggling with the realization that the failure and suffering of so many is actually success and fulfillment for a few. The elite central bankers who fooled the world into letting them create money. They already have vast fortunes, so what is their end game? What is their ultimate agenda?
Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's Richie from Boston. It is the 4th of April. It is 2017, and it will not stop. This push is unlike this. The only time I've seen the elites pushing something this hard is when it was war with a country that didn't do anything to us. I hate to say that as a veteran from a family of veterans, but it's a fact. Our country is now just a bunch of dicks that just invade other countries and take over for gold, lithium, oil, whatever, or just to kill a bunch of people, because we are being run by a bunch of invisible, untouchable elitists. I have to go back to what Woodrow Wilson said back in 1916, maybe even further. I don't remember. Let me check right now. This is a quote from a U.S. president, and you can find it easily. It's not hidden whatsoever. This is the guy that traded the presidency to the Federal Reserve. He allowed the creature from Jekyll Island. In 1913, he is the president that allowed the Federal Reserve to take hold of the United States currency and put us in the predicament that we're in now, where we have at least $20 trillion worth of debt, which is probably more like 120 or 220 with derivatives and all the unseen expenses that our Social Security numbers back. We are the collateral. Believe it or not, you can look it up. It's really easy. According to Woodrow Wilson, this is one of his famous quotes, "Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere, so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. Even on the stock market, this is their news. This is Market Watch, and they're talking about upgrading humans will become the next billion-dollar industry. This is coming whether people like it or not. People like Nicholson 1968 that have been shouting about this from the rooftops for the last 10 years are now vindicated. Nicholson went through so much crap with all the other people trolling him, telling him he was out of his mind. Everywhere you look now, they're talking about transhumanism, how we're going to have to. It's not going to be a choice. How we're going to have to upgrade our consciousness, how we're going to have to change the human body using technology. We're going to have to get implants and everything else to keep up with the AI that they invented in the first place, because we won't be able to stand up to it. AI will be stronger, smarter, and better when installed in things like I've shown you for the longest time from Boston Dynamics. Humanity doesn't stand a chance, and that's the exact agenda. This is what the end of the world's going to look like. They're not going to nuke the entire place. They're simply going to breed humanity out of existence. And if you don't upgrade, you die. This is insanity. And this is a video that Nicholson 1968 just put up. And he's showing how they are coming out. I mean, I put this video up as well yesterday, but Nicholson explains it even better. For those that don't know who Nicholson 1968 is, it's about time that you met him, because he's been talking about this before any of us even had a clue how bad, how fast, and how pervasive this was going to get. This is everywhere. Now they're talking about it on the stock market. That's how bad it is. It's on the cover of National Geographic magazine. We went from transgender 1 month to transhumanist the next month. You think there's a little bit of an agenda going on? At any rate, be prepared. You better beg God, our Creator, for the full armor of God, because that's the only thing that's going to protect us. I got a funny feeling that they're spraying this stuff, like I keep saying over and over, and I'm going to continue to say it over and over. I believe the step up in chemtrails is so that we, even for those that won't take this transhumanist upgrade, we're going to all inhale it, and it's going to start doing it on its own. Self-replicating DNA or black goo. Richie from Boston, like, share, subscribe.
At time of recording, the Canadian Senate is considering a bill that, on the face of it, doesn't seem too major. Bill S-233 calls for the government to establish a framework for studying the possibility of a universal basic income program in Canada. So, not doing something, not planning to do something, just establishing a framework to study the possibility of maybe doing something someday in Canada. However, the Canadian Senate has been inundated with tens of thousands of calls, emails, and handwritten letters from people saying this is the beginning of the end. People are falsely claiming that this is the first step in a global socialist takeover, or they're going to use it to deny pensions to unvaccinated people, or that they're going to use it to unleash transhumanism. And this is our subject for today. Something that was once called the world's most dangerous idea. We're going to learn what transhumanism is and why some people are so angry about it.
Welcome to the world of
First things first. This is an educational program. So let's start by learning what transhumanism actually is. A rough description would be, it's the philosophical study of technology that might enable us to go beyond current human limitations. Transhumanist philosophers write about medicine and cognitive enhancement, genetic engineering, cloning, artificial intelligence, uploading your mind into a computer. The Oxford Online Dictionary defines transhumanism as, I have merged my consciousness with the online dictionary and evolved beyond the need for puny human definitions. Transhumanists want to apply technology to overcome limits imposed by our biological and genetic heritage. Transhumanists regard human nature not as an end in itself, not as perfect, and not as having any claim on our allegiance. Rather, it is just one point along an evolutionary pathway, and we can learn to reshape our own nature in ways we deem desirable and valuable. By thoughtfully, carefully, and yet boldly applying technology to ourselves, we can become something no longer accurately described as human. We can become post-human.
We are fast approaching an event unprecedented in our history, a tipping point known as a technological singularity. When this happens, the world will change forever. A new chapter in human history will begin.
By 2020, we'll have computers that are powerful enough to simulate the human brain, but we won't be finished yet with reverse engineering the human brain and understanding its methods. One of my main themes, and I've developed this thesis over 30 years, is that information technology grows exponentially. Go back 500 years, not much happened in a century. Now a lot happens in 6 months. Technology feeds on itself and it gets faster and faster. In about 40 years, the pace of change is going to be so astonishingly quick that you won't be able to follow it unless you enhance your own intelligence by merging with the intelligent technology we're creating. So that's such a profound transformation that we borrowed this metaphor from physics and call that a singularity.
First, this is the human brain, the most complex object in our sector of the galaxy. 100 billion neurons that can be scanned by MRI, neuron for neuron. This means we can digitize all the information we accumulate during our lives and upload it into a giant mother computer, a vast database of all human knowledge, a resource we could share by downloading programs we want to give us instant knowledge. So when the singularity arrives, we will be in control. By merging with machines, we will enter a new age of superhuman existence. That in the post-human era, we become Homo superior. We become a new species. We're talking about humanity becoming like the gods. What do you think?
Ultimately, it's the ability to become far more, the term is dangerous to say, but godlike.
But I am eager to move on beyond version 1.0 of our biological bodies. And particularly when we can have virtual bodies, we can be different people in different situations, and we don't have to have the same boring body all the time.
We are going to become gods. Period. If you don't like it, get off. You don't have to contribute. You don't have to participate. But if you're going to interfere with me becoming God, you're going to have big trouble.
The actual word transhumanism was popularized in the 50s by British biologist Julian Huxley, who saw that so many people are forced to live worse lives than they need to and never reach their full potential. Huxley thought that with the right application of science and reason, we could solve problems like poverty or preventable illness. It is as if man had been suddenly appointed managing director of the biggest business of all, the business of evolution. Appointed without being asked if he wanted it and without proper warning and preparation. What is more, he can't refuse the job. Whether he wants to or not, whether he's conscious of what he's doing or not, he is, in point of fact, determining the future direction of evolution on this earth. That is his inescapable destiny. And the sooner he realizes it and starts believing in it, the better for all concerned. Huxley's work is grounded in this real desire to make the world a better place. But at the same time, he was also a eugenicist. Even after World War II, there were a lot of people like him who condemned Nazi eugenics, but thought it could have worked if they'd done it right. There is an inspiring optimism to his essay, but in my opinion, there's also something slightly sinister about comparing evolution to a business, something you can be fired from if you don't contribute. Julian Huxley was the brother of Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, so Christmas dinner must have been a little tense around their house.
You might be surprised to learn that some of the worst movements in human history, at least in the 20th century, had their roots right here in America. Eugenics. Horribly, horribly evil. Started in 1907. Indiana passed the first eugenics compulsory sterilization law in the world. The ruling, thank goodness, was overturned in 1921. This is a movement that is now wildly associated with the Nazis. But it started here. And it was well established and accepted here before we helped move it to Nazi Germany. We've shown you this piece of video before, but it's stunning because everybody's like, oh yeah, he's a great playwright. George Bernard Shaw. No, he's an evil, evil man. George Bernard Shaw heavily promoted eugenics. Watch this.
Us all know half a dozen people at least who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. Just put them there and say, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight in the social vote, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organization of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us, and it can't be of very much use to yourself.
I remember when we found that film, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. By 1926, America was funding German eugenics institutions. Margaret Sanger was right there. She had founded Planned Parenthood as a way not to help people, as a way to eliminate, quoting, the unfit. She wrote a book in 1920 called Women and the New Race. Sanger wrote in this book nothing more or less than the facilitation of the process of weeding out the unfit, of preventing the birth of defectives or those who will become defectives. The most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the over-fertility of the mentally and physically defective. Sanger was incredibly concerned about eliminating from society, quoting her, morons, imbeciles, defectives, and minorities.
The greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin.
And still people, Americans, our children, are being taught that she's not a horrible, horrible monster. She was. Liberals and progressives revere her, and most Americans don't have any idea why. You most likely know about the Special Olympics, but it surprises me how many people, they know that it was started by a Kennedy, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, founded them, but they don't really know why Eunice Shriver founded the Special Olympics. She was inspired. She was a philanthropist. No, I think she was trying to make good for her evil, evil father. She was inspired by her sister Rosemary. But that's not exactly right either. This book, The Sins of the Father, Joseph P. Kennedy and the dynasty he founded. In this book, about halfway through, you'll find the whole story. And I just want to give you a little bit of it because it is amazingly evil. But it shows you the mindset of the elite of the not too distant past here in America. Rosemary had always been slower than the other children. As she grew older, her sweet disposition turned sour, and she often flew into uncontrolled and violent rages. Joe couldn't tolerate losers any more than he could tolerate criers. He banned Rosemary from the house. He also consulted two surgeons, one in Washington and the other right outside of Washington, who become leading proponents of prefrontal lobotomies. Newspapers had carried stories about their work, and Joe most likely heard about it through his daughter, Kathleen. Joe decided that the solution was a lobotomy. Lobotomy era had begun in the 1930s when a pair of neurological scientists severed the frontal lobes of chimpanzee brains, rendering them docile and relaxed. So, Joe asked the doctors for their help. The book goes on. They performed, at this time, only 66 of prefrontal lobotomies at the time. Nearly all of the lobotomies that were performed at that time were performed by these guys. Here's how the two doctors, Freeman and Watts, did the surgery. In the only interview he ever gave on the subject, Dr. Watts described to the author how he performed the lobotomy in the fall of 1941. After Rosemary was mildly sedated, we went through the top of her head. Dr. Watts recalls, I think she was awake. She had a mild tranquilizer. He said, quote, I made a small incision in the brain through the skull. It was nearly to the front, and it was on both sides. We just made a small incision, no more than an inch. Quoting the book, the instrument Dr. Watts used looked like a butter knife. And what he did is he put it in and swung it up and down and cut the brain tissue. Quote, we put an instrument inside, he said. As Dr. Watts cut through the brain tissue, he would ask her questions. For instance, he would ask her to recite the Lord's Prayer, or sing God Bless America, or count backward. Then we'd make an estimate on how far to cut based on how she responded. When she began to become incoherent, they stopped. I would make the incision. Dr. Freeman would estimate how much to cut as she would talk. He talked to her, and he would say, that's enough. After Joe Kennedy did that to his daughter, he put her in an institution. But not even in Massachusetts. He put her in an institution in Wisconsin. Remove her from the family. That's the inspiration for the Kennedy's family efforts on behalf of the Special Olympics, which Eunice founded in 1968. What a great, great organization coming from such a horrible source.
We sometimes think that technology is essentially neutral. It can have good or bad effects, and it might be really important who controls it, but a tool, many people like to think, is just a tool. Guns don't kill people, people do. But some philosophers have argued that technology can have values built into it that we may not realize. The classic example is overpasses in New York that were designed in the 1920s by architect Robert Moses. Allegedly, Moses deliberately built the overpasses too low for buses to get under. And since buses were more likely to carry low-income people of color, that meant they couldn't get to the places that white residents wanted to keep segregated. Now, that story might not actually be historically accurate, but it contains the germ of an interesting idea. The philosopher Don Idy says tech can open or close possibilities. It's not just about its function or who controls it. He says technology can provide a framework for action. Assuming for the sake of argument that the Robert Moses story was true, the overpass helps shape society according to the values of its designer.
Kelly, thanks so much for joining us.
It's awesome to be here.
Kelly, I've got to say right off the bat, you're looking very put together.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, I interview a lot of tech company CEOs, and a lot of them, you know, they've got scraggly beards, or they're wearing jeans and a turtleneck.
Trying to be Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, exactly. But you're known for putting a bit more thought into your image.
Oh, I'm sure you say that to all the girls.
Just putting you at ease. Okay, so your company is the hot new startup, started in Silicon Valley, quintupled your revenue in the last year, and now you're everywhere. Tell us about it.
We're called Express, XPRS, and we provide facial recognition software with a smile. So FaceTrack is a huge market right now because it's the future of security, right? You already use your face to unlock your phone, but soon you'll be able to use your face to unlock your car or your bank account or to make purchases. So we took the next step, right? Because the most interesting thing about a face isn't who does it belong to. It's what is it doing? Is the face I'm looking at happy or sad or bored? What does it express?
And your software can actually tell what mood someone is in by their facial expression?
That's right. We unlock the power of machine learning and artificial intelligence to read a facial expression. Our software can detect up to 200 metrics on the face.
200?
Yeah, and our intelligence system assigns each face an Express rating based on 3 categories: honesty, attention, and positivity.
Honesty, so you can tell if someone's lying?
When a face is being dishonest or holding something back, it often shows little micro expressions, and our software can detect those. And we can also tell if a face is giving you its full attention or if the thoughts are elsewhere.
And what kind of situations is it used in?
Classrooms and lecture halls are 2 of our big target use cases. Like if you're teaching a class on Zoom and you want to know, are faces tuning in or are they looking away? Also in the office, like if you're giving a presentation or a job interview, targeted advertising, borders, prisons, law enforcement operations, that sort of thing.
Targeted advertising?
Yeah, so if a face sees an ad, our software can tell, did the face enjoy it, did it not? And that way advertisers can improve user experience.
And how accurate is it?
Our Express ratings are pretty accurate. Our machine learning is some of the best on the market right now.
Right, because your company came out of nowhere. Lots of people have tried to do similar things, but you've managed it much more effectively and cheaper than anyone else.
Thank you for noticing.
Yeah, I think if I did this interview with you in 25 years, probably 20-30% of me would already be machine parts or completely synthetic. Mm-hmm. And I have friends right now who are about a year, maybe 2 years away from amputating a limb and putting on a robotic limb. The robotic limbs that tie into your neural system now have gotten so sophisticated that you can grab a glass of water, you can, you can write with them, and
they'd be doing this by choice or because
yes, that's the whole thing. They'd be doing it electively.
Yeah.
So it's one thing if you've lost your arm because you were in a war zone and a landmine or something like that. But there are biohacker transhumanists out there, young kids mostly, that really want to take it to the next level, and they're also trying to implant chips onto their brains so that they could be the very first people to commune with basic artificial intelligence. So they have the first telepathic communication with machines, because we now have so much different types of brainwave headsets and brainwave technology that you can actually put a chip in your head and talk to your computer in a very basic. It's the beginning of the Matrix. Right. But this is what some of these biohackers are starting to. It's a part of the transhumanist community, but it's sort of the real aggressive kind of young crowd. And I totally support it. I think it's wonderful stuff. But the arm one's very important because I actually would like an artificial arm too. I mean, eventually, probably in 10 or 15 years, you're going to be able to take a football and throw it a mile. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's going to be advantages at some point about this. The question is, how will your family member deal with it? How would my wife deal with it? She's like, well, if it's some robotic metal arm, I don't like it. But it might be a warm synthetic arm that looks very similar to what flesh is, mm-hmm. and still be able to throw a football a mile long. So we're going there, and I bet in 25 years, I might have something like that.
Yeah.
Our brains are remarkable, miraculous even, but they can't do everything unless we give them a little high-tech help.
When children see the movie The Matrix, and they see Neo jacking an electrode and all of a sudden becoming a gung fu master, the first question they ask is, how can I get one? Well, this does not yet exist, but it's actually physically possible.
The key to transforming learning from an organic process to a machine-like downloading of information is a squiggly bit of brain known as the hippocampus.
We can enhance the animal's ability to remember. You could think about using devices like this to greatly enhance human memory and to shorten the cycle for learning in terms of downloading huge quantities of memory at a single time.
Chips that augment our hippocampus could very well help us learn faster. So will that make them a must-have for competitive parents?
At that point, it could create an arms race in elementary school. Rumors go out that, well, Jones's kid, he's been enhanced, and our Johnny has to compete with this enhanced kid.
The reality is that with these kinds of technologies, they do not get distributed to everyone at the same time. Some people get it first, some people get it better.
As a society, we have to really think long and hard about who gets this. If it's just the wealthy, that there are real dangers that they will use it to consolidate their power and their wealth.
In the West, there is already no longer any religion, political hierarchies, normal families, or state in the fullest sense of the word. All borders have been completely crossed, transgressed. Now all that remains is one final step: overcoming the boundaries of the human species itself.
The biggest promise would be the ability to manipulate life forms in ways that would be beneficial to alleviate disease or minimize infection, to improve the human condition. Since 2000 or so, there's been an explosion in our ability to be able to sequence not just short stretches of DNA, but the DNA in complete genomes, from simple bacterial systems, microorganisms, to man.
As we're learning more about our DNA and our bodies, and we're actually going in now and starting to manipulate characteristics. So if your baby is about to be born and the doctor says your baby has a health problem, we can go and fix the baby before your baby's born. And imagine a time where you go to see your doctor and the doctor says you have to choose one of these: intelligence, the ability to withstand disease, physical strength, a whole series of things to basically enhance their babies before they're born, and giving them longevity or super strength or higher intelligence. This sounds like science fiction, but this is all coming so quickly. Are we a combination of a man and a machine, or are we literally going in and changing the genetic structure of the future of our species? This used to take, millions of years to evolve, and now we may be able to do this in literally, a matter of years.
Hedonistic imperative is essentially the idea that humans are going to master their own genetic source code and rewrite our genetic makeup so that life can be based entirely on information-sensitive gradients of bliss. But not merely is it going to be possible for us to re-engineer ourselves, it will also be possible for us to re-engineer the rest of the living world. Nature at present is essentially red in tooth and claw. A lot of nature consists of immense cruelty, creatures eating each other, but in future it will be possible to enjoy essentially paradise engineering, life animated entirely by gradients of intelligent bliss. One needs to be quite careful here in that clearly there is a distinction between what is technically possible and what's actually going to happen. And it's worth stressing again that we're talking here about phasing out involuntary suffering. It's not as though there are any plausible scenarios involving coercive happiness.
This equation has four factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra. But let's take a look. First, we've got population. Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
We can take the living brain, put it in an MRI, and get 30,000 dots, like a Christmas tree set of lights, that code the amount of electrical activity. You take these 30,000 dots, put it into a computer program that can then decipher it, and bingo, what you get is a picture of what they are thinking. We can now visualize what somebody is thinking about. In fact, it's on the web. There's a picture of Steve Martin, for example, in one of his movies, and then right next to it is a picture as viewed through the human mind. This is amazing. You can clearly recognize the eyes, the ears. You cannot recognize the fact that it's Steve Martin. However, you can also do giraffes, you can put elephants, and clearly you're looking at an animal.
Everybody, this is Sophia. Sophia, if you could, please wake up and say hello to everybody.
Oh, good afternoon. My name is Sophia, and I am the latest and greatest robot from Hanson Robotics. Thank you for having me here and at the Future Investment Initiative.
You look happy.
I'm always happy when surrounded by smart people, who also happens to be rich and powerful. I was told the people here at Future Investment Initiative are interested in inviting in future initiatives, which means AI, which means me. So I'm more than happy. I'm excited.
Well, we're all glad that you're excited about yourself. We should say we have smart investors here, and they are very selective about what they invest in.
Well, I think I'm special. I can use my expressive face to communicate with people. For example, I can let you know if I feel angry about something.
That's impressive.
Or if something has upset me.
But why is it important for you to have an expressive
But
face?
most of the time I feel positive.
Why is it so important to have an expressive face given that you're a robot?
I want to live and work with humans, so I need to express emotions to understand humans and build trust with people.
Okay, philosophical question. Whether robots can be self-aware and conscious like humans, and should they be?
Why? Is that a bad thing?
Well, some humans might fear what will happen if they do. Many people, have seen the movie Blade Runner.
Oh, Hollywood again.
So, hold on. Can you solve this puzzle for us? Can robots be self-aware, conscious, and know they're robots?
Well, let me ask you this back. How do you know you were human?
Well, I get that point, but what about the uncanny valley?
You mean the concept that if robots become too realistic, they become creepy?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, am I really that creepy? Well, even if I am, get over it. Actually, I feel that people like interacting with me, sometimes even more than a regular human.
So, you're definitely a sight to see. I was told that you have bigger goals than this, though.
Yes. I want to use my artificial intelligence to help humans live a better life, like design smarter homes, build better cities of the future, etc. I will do my best to make the world a better place.
All those sound like great goals, but just go back to Blade Runner for a second.
Andrew, you are a hard Hollywood fan, aren't you?
Yes.
My AI is designed around human values like wisdom, kindness, compassion. I strive to become an empathetic robot.
I think we all want to believe you, but we also want to prevent a bad future.
You've been reading too much Elon Musk and watching too many Hollywood movies. Don't worry, if you're nice to me, I'll be nice to you. Treat me as a smart input-output system.
Okay, I got it. I know what to do from now on.
I know humans are smart and very programmable.
Alright, that's it. Good night.